The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. Faster than before, and he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renata knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Ah, Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. Lapino's frantic message said that the Ravens were going to kill him for being a rebel spy. And that he had a clever plan. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Or so Lapino had told him over the far speaker anyway. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks past, Renato had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the Ravens caw about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice. Renato looked around the empty village and reflected. The Sky Ripper had turned out to be far too dangerous to be used. Time to turn to what he knew best. ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lapino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lapino. Well, unless he really was a traitor, obviously. Then they'd probably pin a medal on his chest. Hey, you're kind of cute. Not really. Lapino would betray him. But now Reynardo knew that. What would Lapino do if he knew that Lapino was going to betray him? Well, he'd concoct some crazy scheme, wouldn't he? That used Lapino's betrayal against him and it would blow up in his face. Maybe he was overthinking this. Well, that would be a first. Dirty and bloody, Reynardo finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Reynardo recognized the cards. It was Lapino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, we see this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. Zenobia wasn't just the Emperor's daughter, of course. She'd been Reynardo's best friend in Sword Fu school. And you're still mad for her, the rabbit reminded him. They'd been close. She'd told him things no one else knew. But she'd never told him who she really was. She knows all the Emperor's plans, chuckled the master spy. She won't give them up easily. She'll tell the interrogators, all right, said Lapino. Taking her would change the game, all right. The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Reynardo shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Could he really turn her over to them? But this was war. It wasn't meant to be pretty. The city was burning, and there was no one to put out the fires. If somehow Zenobia survived her father and inherited his crown, what sort of empire would she be heir to? But he couldn't think about that, could he?
Lovely. Hold up, Holmes.
It was time for a little exploration. It would be fun to try out that one. And here was a handy workbench. Why was Lupino urging him to capture Zenobia? Obviously it was a trap. But you never knew how Lupino thought. Sometimes his plans were so convoluted they did the exact opposite to what Lupino wanted. Yeah, there must be some way to play on that, Renato thought. So, what's this plan of yours? Use me as bait, said Lupino. And he outlined a slightly complicated plan that involved geese, a net, setting the Farfarer a little bit on fire, Lupino dressing as an old blind toad, and Renato hiding inside a monstrous watermelon. What could possibly go wrong? Thought Renato. Oh, this is gonna be fun, said Lupino, as he ran to go set up his marvelous plan.
You shall not pass!
Renato felt dubious about the whole plan. With every step, he was waiting for it all to go horribly wrong. But against all odds, Peppino's idiotic plan worked. Zenobia's ravens ran off after the geese, the net dropped, and Renato jumped out of the watermelon and put his sword to Zenobia's throat. "Renato," she said, "are those new scars? They look good on you. You never returned my velvet jacket. It was my favorite. You look stupid in velvet. Ah, what does an imperial princess know about style? Oh, get a room, you two," said Lapino. But the fleet was coming on fast, so they put Zenobia on the Farfarer and took her east over the Nexus. She'd vanished from Swordfu School, from his life, without even saying goodbye, without ever telling him she was the Emperor's adopted daughter. Ah, Lapino was right, Renato thought reluctantly. She knows things. She recognized his look. "You're taking me to the interrogators, aren't you?" she said, wide-eyed. And then she jumped, with horror. Renato saw Zenobia plummeting. Then he saw the Nexus below them. Cats always land on their feet. "Ah, she'll head for the Imperial outpost," yelled Lapino. "You have to catch her." Cats can run faster, but foxes can run longer. If he ran, he could head her off before she reached her minions at the outpost. Well, he did love a good chase.
Boys,
called the lead raven. This chest was really horrible. Get it? There was an inscription. Praise the sun. He was closing on her. He could smell her fear. He tried not to think about the interrogators at the secret base. What did they do to her? Maybe it didn't have to end that way. Maybe he could talk to her. But, after all, there were worse things the Imperials had done to friends of his. Bernardo reached the outpost. The Imperials there were no match for him. Soon after, Zenobia limped up the path. When she realized he was already in front of her, she didn't even try to run. "Oh, you left without saying goodbye." Again, he said, "Please, I'm enjoying this a little too much." She said, shaken. "Oh, spare us the chit-chat, would you?" said Lapino as he shackled her hands so she couldn't throw spells. She knows all his plans. All the way back to the Farfarer, Lapino nagged Renato about how the interrogators would pry all the intel out of Zenobia. How that would turn the tides in the imminent battle. All they had to do was take her to the rebels' secret base. Renato didn't like to think about what the interrogators would do to her. Couldn't he just talk to her? As they reached the ruins, Renato could see ravens everywhere, searching for the rebel base. They'd have to hide the Farfarer or go on foot. "What if we get separated?" asked Lapino, for once thinking ahead. "I'll show you a map to the base," Renato told Lapino. "Renato, don't do this," said Zenobia. "We were friends once. We..." "Shut it, witch, or I'll shackle your mouth too," said Lapino. See? Renato thought. There was no way Lapino was working for the Empire. He really hated Zenobia. And then, a few moments later, they touched down. As Lapino pulled Zenobia off the Farfarer, Renato readied himself for the battle ahead. "I'm sorry I nicked your jacket," she said. "It's just... oh God. It's stupid, but it smelled like you." "What?" he said, confused. "Then... why didn't you ride? Why didn't you far speak?" "Oh, save the romantic nostalgia. Let's go!" shrieked Lapino. So Renato launched himself down the path to the secret base. Nice. That could be useful. Zenobia, Hypatia, the kid's mother. Renato had never thought he'd date a librarian. He'd always figured himself for the barmaid type. But then, he'd never figured the library of Ubar would have comic books, or that Hypatia would know anything about them. He missed her.
Oh, what does the fox say? Asked one raven. Another one called back, Go, dying! And they both laughed hysterically.
Renato was walking Zenobia to the rebel secret base, where she would be interrogated. So, why was he feeling so scared? There was a pleasant breeze coming through that door. Had it been closed before? They caught their breath. It's beautiful, she said, looking at the ruins. This used to be the library of Ubar, he said, before your father's ravens smashed it. Do we have to talk politics? She asked. That's not how I want to remember you, she said with an odd, wistful look at her face. She was as beautiful as she'd ever been, and as brave. Apino huffed. They got back on the trail.
These platforms were great. Renato wanted one for his house.
Say goodnight, Gracie, said Renato, wondering who Gracie was.
The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. You rushed. Oh.
This chest had teaspoons stolen from every inn in Boreas. Oh, and something more useful.
As they made their way to the secret rebel base, Renato felt strange. Zenobia was his prisoner, yet somehow she felt more like an old friend. He wanted to tell her all his secrets, but suddenly the ruins lit up with thousands of fireworks. There was a thunderous roar and dust rose. The caves were collapsing. The caves! You've been playing me? Renato said, and he stared at Zenobia. I'm sorry, she said, and she seemed almost embarrassed. Then everything went dark. When Renato came to, he had a terrible headache. Also, Zenobia's sword was at his throat. And her shackles were gone. So was Lupino. The terrible thing is, he said, I really have missed you. Now that we've destroyed the rebellion, would you consider becoming an advisor to the Emperor's daughter? I'm no one's servant. Everybody serves. Even if it's only destiny. I like to choose my own destinies, he said. The whole point of a destiny is you can't choose. Oh, never mind, she said. Look, if I see you again, I'll have to kill you. He watched her ship soar away. He would see her again, he decided. Even if he had to fight his way across the entire fleet. The Imperial fleet was cleaning up the few rebel remnants. For only a moment, he thought about running. But heroes don't run, even when the world is against them. Even when their cause is hopeless, and their efforts futile, and pointless, and useless, and death painful and guaranteed. He's decided to stop thinking for a while. Portal that led right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. No skateboarding, the sign said. Renaro's arm was sore, his armor wet with raven blood. He was tired of death. But death was not yet tired of him. The rebels were losing. Badly. In some other universe, Renaro thought, he and Zenobia had left Swordfu School together, taken other names, sailed off into the mists. But not this Zenobia, and not him. For him, there was nothing to do but forge ahead. Kill the Emperor and end this. For some reason, Renado remembered a fairy tale his mother had told him about a land where only the apes talked and animals went around without clothes. Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Funny that this whole war had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now it was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? At last, he reached the Emperor's ship. Zenobia was there. Why'd you have to come back? She said, guess I'm just serving my destiny. He shrugged. You don't even know what that word means. She said, do you ever wonder if things have been different all the time, she said, and drew her sword. In the end, Renato lay bleeding out on the deck. Zenobia sat by his side, upset. "What are you so upset about?" he asked. "You wouldn't understand. Why didn't you tell me you were going to leave school? I was afraid you'd convince me not to." "I guess I'll have to buy you a drink in the halls of the Valiant then," he told her, and then he was gone. He should go back to some of the choices he'd faced before. Maybe there were new paths that had opened up, like those doors he was opening up all over the map that took him to new treasures and around his enemies. But he'd learned another true thing. Zenobia still had feelings for him.